Can everyone hear me? Okay. Okay. Didn't hear any
Yes.
no's, so let me know if you're having any difficulty in hearing me. Yes, this presentation is based on, as Mike and Sarah mentioned, a white paper that Kusumal and I did, and just give a little bit of background about us. We are in supply chain management in the College of Business here at Penn State, and we've been working in the biofuels area for maybe about 4 years, so we're relatively new to the area. And on the NEWBio project, our intended areas of study and that we are pursuing were in the supply chain and logistics areas, more on the conceptual side, as there are other researchers on the team who are doing the modeling. The researchers at the Idaho National Lab and University of West Virginia are doing the logistics and supply chain modeling. So we're doing some of the conceptual research. We're also doing procurement analysis of and looking at the relationships between the suppliers of biomass and the biorefineries, and also trying to identify successful business models for companies in the industry. And so this presentation is on marketing, and we ended up spending this past year doing the research on marketing because the subject came up in NEWBio. It was at our first and second annual meetings, the topic of the topic of alternative markets for biomass materials arose because of the fact that there is too little biorefinery capacity right now to use the biomass that is being grown. So though marketing wasn't our original intention, Kusumal has a good background in marketing, and she was the lead author, is the lead author on our white paper. What I'm going to do in this presentation is just really describe the white paper and the structure of it, and then because it is a fairly lengthy paper, it's about 110 pages long, and will it'll be available for you to read in detail, but I just want to tell you a little what it's about. And then Sarah's going to take over and provide information on her observations of some of the markets that are in existence already. So our approach was to read the literature, so we reviewed a variety of types of publications, trade literature, government publications, industry publications, and we found that there is a lot written about markets for biomass material, but there wasn't really a comprehensive overview of the markets, and also not a systematic overview of the different biomass products, that because they do range very widely in forms, and they're traded in different markets, and there are also, in marketing, we talk about different levels of marketing, and the term that's used is tiers. So there are multiple tiers of biomass business players, and they each offer different biomass-based products and face different competitors. So what Kusumal did was really try to show the relationships between or among the different tiers. So we did 4 tiers, and I'll describe them here. So if we start with Tier 1, and that is the producers of raw biomass materials, and they can be categorized into woody and non-woody, and this does focus on lignocellulosic biomass. So in the woody uh, biomass, I'm trying to get the pointer here. Okay, here it comes. In the woody biomass, lignocellulosic biomass, we have willow, poplar, eucalyptus as examples, and non-woody, the grasses, the miscanthus switchgrass, giant reed. So this is the tier 1, represents the tier 1, and then the tier 2 is represented by the refined and intermediate biomass. So here we have energy products and non-energy products, and the energy products are bioheat, biopower, transportation biofuel. Non-energy products are represented by pulp, biochar, lignin, basic and platform industrial chemicals. Some examples are listed there. And then the tier 3, we title biomass derived industrial input. So really the tier 2 and the tier 3 are intermediate tiers, industry to industry. And in the tier 3, the biomass derived industrial input are formulated chemicals, various plastic polymers, and biopharmaceutical ingredients, to name 3 categories. And then tier 4 are bio-based industrial products. So still industrial products, but making products that are going to be used to produce end consumer products. So this would include various cellulosic fibers and filaments, adhesives, rubber products, and chemical products such as resins and photographic chemicals. So in the paper, for each biomass product tier, we address the questions of who are the sellers of these products, what are the markets, and who are the buyers in the markets. And that's so showing this in a little more detail in another way. So we start with tier 1, and this would represent the biomass suppliers and the energy crop growers, as in the NEWBio project, in the woody biomass industry, loggers, for example, and they produce grow the raw biomass materials, which might be ground or chipped raw biomass materials, for example, the willow, switchgrass, logging residues. And so tier 1 sells to tier 2 companies, and that would be the users of raw biomass materials and biorefineries, but there are other users of this direct this raw biomass materials as well. The tier 2 companies produce the refined and intermediate biomass. Again, refined biomass, refined biomass or biomass-derived products, and the platform chemicals. And then, so they would sell to tier 3, who are industrial users of refined biomass, such as producers of plastic polymers and resin manufacturers. And again, these are intermediate steps in the production process, so that you have here taking the production of these polymers and plastics a step further, selling to the tier 4 markets, again, industrial users, such as chemical companies, and they would produce the products that are going to be used in industrial end markets that would eventually be sold to consumers, such as food packaging, carpets, and we go into a little more detail on each one of these in the subsequent slides. So I do want to mention one thing about this framework. It is presented in a kind of a nice, neat chain, but it's not hard and fast as far as who can sell to whom. There might be companies operating in several of these tiers, and there's also possibilities of interaction between any of or among any of these tiers. But as far as the critical mass of companies goes, this would be the representation of where the companies would most likely reside. So you can kind of consider these as different markets at different levels of the marketplace. And so, as I said, this was a systematic, comprehensive effort, although the study was the paper was completed about 6 months ago, so given the changes that take place, I won't verify that it is absolutely up to date, but it's probably been more developments. But it does provide a common language for various entities in the biomass supply chains in forming a systematic view of the biomass market opportunities. And it also is a generic, in fact, the paper is really it is a framework for case-by-case market identification and analysis of the competitive landscapes in the individual markets. And because each company has a specific product portfolio and business strategy, so this isn't really a how-to marketing guide, but it's a reference paper so that companies could go and see where a particular industry resides in the markets, and there would be quite a bit more analysis that could be done on the in the different markets, and we're going to talk about our efforts in moving along in a specific market that we're working on now. So, but this is going to go through in a little more detail of the 4 tiers, answering the questions: what are the markets, who are the sellers, and who are the buyers? So in Tier 1, as we mentioned, there are energy and non-energy markets. So the energy would include bioheat and biopower, biorefinery, fuel pellets. Non-energy, paper and paperboard, composite materials, industrial polymers and plastics, animal bedding, livestock, feed and forage, mulch, erosion control, product markets, and the sellers are the growers in the agricultural industry, depending on the products involved. In the woody biomass industry, loggers and sawmills as examples. The buyers now, we again look at the energy and non-energy markets. So in the energy markets, the buyers would be electric power generation companies like co-fire power plants and combined heat and power plants, industrial biorefineries, and wood product manufacturers. In the non-energy markets, would be represented by pulp mills, paperboard mills, farms, basic chemical manufacturers, construction, landscaping service providers, to name a few. So that's Tier 1. In Tier 2, the markets are in the energy, bioheat, and biopower, and again, transportation fuel, looking at cellulosic ethanol, advanced biofuel, fuel cells. In the non-energy markets, pulp markets, feed markets, biochar, again, industrial plastic and polymer, industrial markets for lignosulfate, sulfonate, basic and specialty chemical markets, and plastic and resin manufacturing. And here, the sellers primarily would be the industrial biorefineries, but there may be others. And the buyers in the energy markets, again, the power generation, petroleum and petroleum products stations, bulk stations and terminals, and petroleum products merchant wholesalers. In the non-energy markets, paper mills, paperboard mills, animal feed, supplement and concentrates manufacturers, plastic and resin manufacturers, and pharmaceutical manufacturers. So going to Tier 3, again, getting into some end use, the markets, but also a lot of intermediate use. So the markets would be fertilizer manufacturing industry, biopharmaceutical and nutritional products, dye and pigments, synthetic fibers, polystyrene foams, plastic material, and polymers. Again, the sellers, electric power generators, or generation companies, petroleum and petroleum products, bulk stations and terminals, and petroleum and petroleum products, merchant wholesalers, non-energy sellers, industrial users of the biomass-derived industrial input, in other words, the Tier 2 buyers. The buyers for Tier 3, electric power distribution systems, industrial and commercial buyers, gasoline stations. In the energy market, non-energy, pharmaceutical manufacturers, industrial ink, cellulosic fibers and filaments, and manufacturers of compounding plastic resins. So then we get to Tier 4, again, now these are still industrial end markets, but producing some products that would be sold to the end consumers, paint manufacturing, carpet and rug mills, industrial printing, soap and cleaning compounds, rubber product manufacturing, such as used in automotive parts, automotive manufacturing, auto parts, automotive interior manufacturing, plastic product and packaging manufacturing, such in the food and beverage packaging industry, plastic film, sheet and bags, and plastic bottle manufacturers. So the sellers would be, again, in the energy market, the electric power distribution systems, including electric power brokers, gasoline service stations, and non-energy, the Tier 3 buyers. And here, the buyers in the energy market would be the consumers, and the non-energy market, again, the broad range of manufacturing industry mentioned in the markets, but now we're getting very close to consumer markets in this tier. Okay, so that's the conceptual framework. As I mentioned, it does represent the levels of markets, but again, I do want to mention that companies may participate in different, in multiple or multiple levels of the markets, or may communicate among the different tiers. So trying to see where we are as far as, okay, so that's the conceptual framework, and I think Sarah's going to provide some really good examples of her observations, and she does work with the companies of how some of these markets exist in the marketplace.
Thanks very much, Evelyn. So as you may have gathered from all of this discussion, we realize that for the average producer, accessing some of these really higher tier markets can be really difficult. It can involve a lot of middle people, a lot of networking, and a lot of time. So for the average producer who has biomass to sell, I think it's appropriate to kind of focus on the possibilities in these lower tier markets. One of the main reasons we want to do that is like Evelyn said, with these initiatives like NEWBio and other programs where wood and warm season grass materials are being, people are being encouraged to plant these and manage them, there's kind of a hazy promise on the horizon of a large-scale biorefinery coming to the local area, securing these long-term contracts with producers, but we don't see that happening broadly at a very broad regional scale. Often those are a little bit too far away for a producer to access easily, or again, larger scale. So what we see are a lot of people who've kind of become interested in these energy markets and started growing biomass materials, especially some of these perennial crops, and have them now established on their land and are looking desperately for markets for them. So from an extension perspective, the most useful information I can try to provide are some examples of where that exact situation is being addressed by a local market that's accessible to a producer and can be easily replicated across multiple regions. So I think that while there are a lot of opportunities here, and Evelyn gave a very comprehensive list, if you look at her paper, you'll see an even more comprehensive list of those options in the Tier 1 and Tier 2 classifications. I just want to focus on a couple of very specific examples where I see success in those areas. So in my experience, there are kind of 4 major categories in which those successful lower tier marketing schemes work in terms of finding something for the producer to connect with. The first one are local energy applications. If you are lucky enough to be near a larger biorefinery, you can easily set up a longer-term contract, secure that market for yourself and be happy as a clam. But for others, they have to look for other opportunities. But there are certain energy applications that do tend to work locally and do tend to be commonly seen across our region. And the other 3 examples are non-energy markets where there seem to be a lot of promise. For both wood products and warm season grass products, which I'm focusing on here because they are the preferred feedstocks that the NEWBio project works with. And those 3 non-energy markets where we see a lot of success are in absorbency markets, uses for fill and fiber materials, and then the value that the product has while it's actually living and performing as a living material. So let's talk about the first one of those. Combustion markets that are direct combustion, it's easy to understand how that seems to be a pretty easily accessible market for an average producer. In a direct combustion market or a co-combustion market, you take a product like a wood chip that can be chipped in the forest or at the landing or with a forage harvester in the case of shrub willow, and directly marketed for combustion without a lot of intermediate processing. So in this case, those those markets are certainly more accessible at this time to a wood product rather than a grass product, mostly because grass products and other agricultural residues tend to have higher ash content, which can create some problems in some cases for certain boilers and certain materials that are unable to handle those types of materials, although they do exist. The one example that I want to highlight where we see wood chips working very well in a larger scale setting that can be seen pretty commonly across the region is in wood-fired boilers for institutional heat and institutional combined heat and power. So I'm highlighting here an example through the Pennsylvania Fuels for Schools program. We did a webinar on Fuels for Schools, and you can certainly go and find that information. And probably that webinar has a lot more up-to-date examples. But this is an example from a few years ago where a middle school in Clearfield, Pennsylvania transferred from a heating system that was originally designed for either natural gas or fuel oil. The reason for that dual heating system was to try to hedge against the possibility for one of those fuels to skyrocket in price, so they thought it would be a good way to minimize risk. However, what they found was that both of those materials ended up costing them a lot of money to heat their facility. So when they switched over to a biomass heating system, a wood-fired boiler system, in the first full year, they saved $89,000 a year compared to full function on natural gas, or over $138,000 a year if compared to what they would have spent on fuel oil. So in these situations, it's great for everybody. It's great for the producer. If it's located in an area where there's a lot of timber harvesting activity, wood processing facilities, there's certainly an abundance of the material available, whether it's low-use wood or waste products from a sawmill operation or something like that. And schools are everywhere, hospitals are everywhere. It's pretty easy to make those linkages. So I think that this sort of medium-scale energy application that's not really residential, but it's not really very broad-scale utility generation is a really interesting opportunity. And certainly this application has potential for places that are already processing biomass products and want to use process heat. That happens a lot in kilns and other wood product handling systems. So beyond energy markets, if we want to focus on some of these non-energy markets, like I said, the grasses get kind of left out in a lot of cases from direct combustion markets unless they are pelletized and have a lot of quality control and there's a system to be able to handle them. But the grasses really shine in terms of their properties as an absorbent material. So I want to talk about two examples of very good success that perennial grasses have had in marketing as animal bedding. There's kind of two columns of pictures here, and I want to focus first on the left side. Steve Harnish is a farmer in southeastern Pennsylvania in the Lancaster area, and he's planted 2 acres of miscanthus on his land with the assistance of a SARE grant. And those 2 acres of miscanthus for him have become the major source of material that he's using in a compost pack bedded scenario for a barn of about 50 dairy cows. He switched over, he wanted to try to do this to switch over from pine shavings because he was finding that sawdust and pine shavings tended to see very high price spikes, especially as demand for wood pellets increased in the winter months, and he wanted to have a little bit more autonomy and a little more control over his supply. So now he's got this material, he's supplying it for himself, and in the trials that he's done, here you can see his compost bedded pack barn. On the left, a sample of the miscanthus, chopped miscanthus material that he's using on the left side here, and the pine shavings that he had been using on the right side here. So he did a pretty, direct comparison in the same situation to compare these two materials. And what he found were that the side that had the miscanthus incorporated into it was quite a bit drier than the pine shaving side by about 5% moisture, which is pretty significant when you start to think that moisture management is really what it's all about in terms of maintaining a healthy dairy herd, and tended to be a little bit warmer for him. So based on those metrics, which are the most important for him, he certainly has no doubt that miscanthus is a very successful material for him. Miscanthus has also been marketed very successfully in the UK and in Canada for large animal bedding, especially for horses, where people tend to like it a lot. They see that it lasts a long time and is very easy to manage while it's in practice and also while it's rotting down in their muck piles. On the right is an example of a switchgrass application where chopped switchgrass is being used as a preferred poultry bedding system. So in terms of poultry production, again, moisture management is really key, and the absorptive qualities of these grasses make switchgrass a logical winner here. Again, we're comparing to pine shavings, which is the traditional bedding material. And a study done in 2010 found that there were no differences in terms of the overall size or health of chicks that were bedded on switchgrass versus conventional materials, but there was a very significant difference in terms of foot pad health, specifically a much lower incidence of foot pad dermatitis, which is a disease, you can see a picture of it here, that tends to affect chickens. And okay, well, what's the importance of the feet? First, I mean, this is a great for animal welfare to be able to show that your chickens are certainly much healthier in their operation. But also, this is a pretty successful market. Chicken feet are a very lucrative Asian market for human consumption. So if you can add value to your operation by having this higher quality product, that's certainly attractive. So by no means are these the only two animals and applications for which this works, but these are certainly two very successful examples that we've seen. By extension, as we kind of think about these other absorbance, the quality of absorbency, I want to think about another application in which absorbency is really, really important for safety, for environmental management, and for waste management. So in any kind of drilling situation, whether it's for oil, natural gas, there's a lot of waste generated, and much of it is liquid waste. Specifically, anytime you drill a borehole for a well, you generate waste in terms of drill cuttings, which are basically all of the materials that are being pulled out of that hole, as well as the oil-based muds, refined oil-based muds, which are used to lubricate that and actually do the drilling process, as well as some of the spent sands and sludges that we see in hydraulic fracturing. So there needs to be a way to handle all of that waste, which is at times semi-solid and semi-liquid. So a very common method for handling that is solidification. So gas companies, oil and gas companies have used a variety of products to turn their sort of semi-liquid leaky wastes that can present a lot of hazards into a more solid material that can be landfilled or can be more easily taken off-site for disposal and for treatment. So solidification can be done with cements, with lime, with sometimes other biological materials, but this is a place in which we see biomass pellets really shining because they are not terribly heavy. It's a biological material, it's easy to handle, there aren't any safety issues in handling, well, there are safety issues, but there aren't strong regulations in terms of how to move and manage biomass material because it's a natural material. And we've seen it very successfully used, switchgrass pellets specifically, very successfully used in this application. Again, for the drill cuttings, for spent refined oil-based muds, and for frac sands and sludges. An important note to make here is that this is not used to treat the actual brine water and flowback water. This is for those other materials that are normally trucked off-site. So for a producer who's able to do some kind of densification, be it a hardwood pellet manufacturer, a softwood pellet manufacturer, or a grass pellet manufacturer, this is not only a very large market, but also a very profitable market, because the value added to be able to dispose of this waste as solid waste rather than liquid waste is a very important financial incentive for those drilling companies. And also, you can dispose of that material more safely if it's complexed in a material that's able to absorb it very easily. So this one, I think, is a particularly interesting opportunity. So at the end of the day, this stuff is just stuff, right? You can kind of think of almost anything you want to do with a straw-type material in terms of grass or wood product material. Wood product markets and supply chains are fairly well established, but we're still kind of seeing some new opportunities with grass markets. All of these products you see in front of you are based with perennial grasses. So you can see here mushroom mulch. That's, I mean, several 100,000 tons of material are used in Pennsylvania every year to produce mushrooms. So certainly that's a place where we could see some of these grass materials coming to into fruition. So there's one mushroom marketer in particular who likes the added value of using switchgrass as a native grass. So he can market his local mushrooms that are grown on native grasses that are also grown locally. So for him, that is kind of added value to the product that he's able to market. Evelyn mentioned erosion control methods. Anything that you can kind of chop down to an easy to handle material can be put into silt socks, into bale lines, into mulch for grass seed, for topsoil erosion control. So in all of those situations, any of these biomass materials could certainly be successful. And again, the ability to market it as a native grass with conservation value or something, or some of the other positive attributes we see marketed along with biomass are really important. And here you can see a couple examples of bioproducts that have been created, in this case with miscanthus canes. The top is a pressed board that looks a lot like a bamboo board for flooring. They found that when they press miscanthus canes along with the same resins that they use to produce plywood, there's a very similar strength to weight ratio, and they perform very well. However, sometimes the absorptive capacity of those materials can be a downside in products like that. However, as an aesthetic material, it's still pretty attractive. So here you see miscanthus that's been broken down into a pulp material and made into compostable plates. So you could imagine this being applied for other paper type products as well. Okay, I always like to end on the note of living markets. So the reason we like to see people using biomass materials in these supply chains is because perennial grass materials and wood materials, forest products, serve a very specific purpose while they're living, to provide habitat, to provide other ecosystem services, water management, erosion control, nutrient control, so runoff control. They provide a lot of services while they're actually living on the ground. Here you see on the left a picture, this is a pretty famous picture, it's been circulated a lot, depicting the extent of the root system on a switchgrass plant. So, you know, the soil holding capacity, the nutrient holding capacity associated with those are certainly attractive attributes. So these are not to be kind of just waved off, you know, these are things that can have very direct monetary value in certain situations. So there's one example in North Carolina where switchgrass is being maintained in place in a field without any type of management whatsoever, just to be used as a spray field for the nitrogen-rich waste that's coming out of hog production areas, to be sprayed on those lands because it will be able to hold those nutrients and prevent them from running off. So for that value, there is $1 per acre value associated with just having switchgrass on the landscape. to the tune of, I think it's about $60 an acre or something like that, just to keep it there, to provide this application. In another situation, switchgrass is being used for, well, the end use for this switchgrass that I'm about to describe is actually for those oil and gas markets. But while it's alive, the producer that's contracting it, the land on which it's being grown, has an agreement with the owner of that land where it won't be harvested until after all of the major hunting seasons. So the owner of that of the land on which that switchgrass is grown has been able to monetize the value of that in terms of he has both a bed and breakfast and a hunting, he leads hunting trips on his land. So he's able to turn the ability to have a differentiated landscape where he has trees, he has switchgrass, and that habitat value has turned into something that he can directly monetize for his own use. And then at the end of the season, that switchgrass is able to be harvested and used for something else. So here you see kind of opening up some opportunities for multiple use management as well, where you can address multiple end uses in multiple markets with a single crop. So those are just a couple of examples. I think those are some of the most interesting ones I've come across. But I want to make a couple of conclusions about what makes a successful market for the actual producer to access. And again, mostly these are tier 1 markets and maybe in some cases tier 2 markets. But the first piece is that the producer is able to market some kind of value added to use whatever biomass material they're producing over some other material, whether it's the material it's replacing is biologically based or not. We see that in the case of that mushroom producer I mentioned, who was able to market the fact that his mushrooms were grown on native grasses as a value added. The second point is that for some of these larger markets, long-term contracts can be really important because a lot of these materials that we want to see more of on the landscape are perennial. They require establishment times. In certain cases, they are expensive to actually plant and get established, so you need to make sure that you're minimizing the risk associated with that investment to make sure that you will have this market for years to come. The third point that's important here is the importance of understanding the logistic limits of what you can do. If you are not able to produce large quantities of pellets, because densifying material can be a really technical, really difficult process, and if you don't have that capacity, then maybe you shouldn't chase after an oil and gas absorption market, for example, because they'll need a large amount of material at a certain pace, and you might not be able to secure a long-term contract. It's easier to move pellets around than it is to move bales around in terms of logistics. I like this picture from Andy Bader here with the truck showing how many bales you can move around, maybe maximally with that truck, when as many pellets would fit easily in the bed. So understanding what you can move and what your radius for application is important. And the final point I wanted to make is that I think these multiple use applications are really interesting, where you have a couple of possible end uses. Again, I mentioned that the farmer and the landowner who were using switchgrass for its value on the land, and then harvesting and using it for downstream applications as well. In other possibilities, if we go back to the poultry example, switchgrass can be grown around poultry houses to manage some of the nitrogen-rich runoff. It can then be harvested and chopped to be used for bedding, and in some cases that bedding, once it's spent and once it's collected feces, can be removed and gasified for energy. So I think looking at some of those multiple use applications are really important. Again, I think finding the really specific opportunities for those depends a lot on what the local options are and what the needs are in these kind of small scale markets. So again, most of these examples are successful for small scale operations between 1 or 2 entities. So I think those are interesting for these tier 1 and tier 2 relationships. But as we scale up into higher tier markets, more complex agreements will become more important. I'm going to turn it over to Evelyn at this point. I'm happy to take questions on any of these materials after Evelyn can kind of make a few more conclusions and finish us up.
Okay, well, yeah, I agree with Sarah's conclusions for the Tier 1 market level, and I just want to mention, since time is running out, again, that our paper is really a broad, high-level overview, and the suggestion was to drill down a bit and try to do an analysis more in depth, and it's really would require a lot of resources to do it for all of the products that we identify in the paper, but we chose one market, one industry, and that's the paperboard industry. And this is what we'll be doing as a next step. And kind of as an example, it's a commonly used method in the marketing industry. It's the 5 forces analysis, looking at rivalry among competitors and threat of new entrants, and the bargaining power of suppliers and buyers, as well as the threat of substitute products or services. So that's what we will be doing as a next step for the paperboard industry. Okay, and I think that's all that we have to discuss regarding our paper. The paper, I think, will be, it's not uploaded yet, but it will be available on the NEWBio website. And I think we're probably ready for questions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Sarah and Evelyn. And we also have Kusamo standing by in case there's specific questions. So please type in your questions, and I'll get one going. So, you know, the ultimate objective of our project, at least, and I'm sure a lot of these producers, is the high-valued stuff like liquid fuels. So how do you view this as a stepping stone to these other markets, these higher value markets, or will it be smooth, or what's going to happen to these low important markets like bedding and absorbents when there's a huge demand for the high value stuff?
I'll start with a couple thoughts and then I'll turn it over to Evelyn. But I think with any new product, any new material that's being produced, a diversity of options for marketing can only be a good thing for the producer. So I think as new options come online, the price structure will kind of shake itself out. If a previously used material ends up being more price competitive, once some new market for perennial grasses, for example, appears, you know, then users will shift back to that material. I think that having these options right now, even at a small scale, allows producers to become more familiar with the management and marketing of these crops, can start to create some cooperative partnerships, build awareness around these materials, and having that expertise when new markets show up will only make the transition to maybe more lucrative opportunities more easier, since they already will have that inbuilt expertise. That's just my opinion. Evelyn, would you agree with that?
Yes, I do agree with that, and also most likely some of the products that Sarah discussed would have greater substitutes than, say, the higher valued. So it would be easier to perhaps substitute other materials for absorbents and, you know, animal bedding. So that would be one way that the biomass could be directed toward the biofuels industry. Okay, and I do see a question by Tom about an idea of the expected return on investment expectations, requirements, and how they differ among the marketeers. No, we don't. That would have to be analyzed on a kind of a case industry-specific basis. So that might be something we could attempt in the paper board analysis. And again, we're kind of doing that as an example so that you know, if people are interested in different industry sectors, that they could replicate that methodology.
Okay, please keep typing your questions. It's been a good discussion. We want to hear your feedback, and obviously on this webinar because you're interested in it, so we'd like to have your views about these alternative markets. See Tom's typing. Okay, there's another question from Tom about strong interest in understanding return on investment for various biomarkets. Yes, that would be a great idea to take on, to look at the relative values of these different market tiers. So I don't see anyone typing right now. Last call for questions. Okay, we've got someone typing, so we'll hang out a minute. Couple of people, great. Akashaka is just thanking us for his work, and Justin.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
So we'll wait one more minute to see if there's another question here. Okay, yeah, Justin does have a question. Are there more alternate markets for grasses than woody biomass?
I'm going to take this one if that's all right. It seems like there's more alternative markets for grasses than woody biomass. Is this true? Why? I would disagree with that. I highlighted more in this presentation for a very specific reason, and that is that I think that wood product markets are very well established. The supply chains are very well established. I think it's easier to kind of enter that marketing conversation than it is with a relatively new agricultural product like the perennial grasses. But I think, so the reason that I highlighted more of those is because I think that there needs to be a little bit more awareness around some of those opportunities. But yeah, you can kind of think about marketing a grass product anywhere that a traditional straw type material would be used, and maybe even in other applications as well. But I think that willow, for example, enjoys a pretty, maybe not easy, but easier integration into traditional wood product markets.
Right. So that's a good answer, and I think on that note, we want to create awareness for all the products that feedstocks we produce. So appreciate your question, Justin, and everyone's input, and thank you all for listening. Again, thanks to Sarah and Evelyn for presenting, and we're recording this, so it will be available on our NEWBio website in a day or so. And I also want to just note that our next webinar is October 14th, and that's going to be on willow harvesting and chip quality from harvesting operations. So look out for that on our website. Forthcoming attractions also include torrefaction, biochar, marginal land issues, and so on. So we've got a full slate of webinars for you to keep you busy monthly. So we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care, everyone. And again, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.